Paul, you must be pleased with the result today. What were some of the highlights for you?
Well, thanks, Ed. Look, I'm very pleased with the results. It's really the focused execution of our strategy that the team has been executing on for the last couple of years, actually, and that continuation of the execution is what I'm most pleased with. The results are fantastic. It's really the scoreboard. It's the game plan that we continue to be focused on. So do we have the right strategy to supply these life-saving, life-extending medicines to patients around the globe? And are we keeping up with the supply and the demand? And I think we are. And clearly the strategy is working in terms of not only the production and the supply, but the innovation that we continue to deliver through our differentiated products across the globe, and that R&D investment in the innovation that we continue to drive. So investments in the business, both in terms of innovation and in terms of capital and in terms of people, as well as really maintaining the culture of the organization, which I think is extremely important to what we do.
Yeah, profit in the half of about $1.2 billion US dollars, and it looks like roughly 1/3 of that will be paid to investors as dividends. Do you think that's going to keep investors happy, that sort of dividend ratio?
Well, look, I think they're used to the CSL dividend ratio, and we're not a high divvy stock, but it's also because we're a growth stock in terms of our ability to reinvest. And we do try to balance our investment portfolio because we do want to have a good return to shareholders. I think the shareholders have been rewarded as well in the share price because of the investments that we've made and the growth that the company has experienced. And that means that we will invest more in R&D, our commercial infrastructure, also our facilities to keep up with the demand. So it's really a balance of all of those aspects that you have to do when you're looking at your capital investments and where the money is being redeployed. We find that the best place for us to invest in is in our own business because of the strategy that we've employed.
And that R&D investment that you're talking about, is the majority of that in the Australian market?
So our basic research is hubbed here in Australia. We have a large presence in Melbourne, and we're going to be expanding that presence. Just this week, we turned the sod on the new bespoke building that we're going to have, and really the medical precinct in Melbourne, which is one of the best in the world in terms of science and translational medicine. And CSL will now be a cornerstone in that precinct because we're investing in the research that is done here in Australia. And we will also have some space in that building, not only for additional lab space, that we also currently have a large lab facility at the University of Melbourne, but also this allows us the opportunity to have some smaller lab space for some new technologies and some potentially startup biotechs if CSL has insight that can help them kind of get moving and get started, because we're here to invest in the future of Australia's science. And so that's where the research is. Our development and our clinical trials are mostly run out of the Northern Hemisphere because that's where most of the trials are run. So the research and development piece, you really have to look at the research part, which is global because, as I said, the hub is here in Australia. But we have a spoke arrangement as well, so kind of a hub and spoke model where we have research in Germany and Switzerland and also in the US, and that's all connected. So we really manage R&D as a global entity.
Today with your results, you've also upgraded your full year profit guidance to about $2.1 billion US dollars. What are some of the risks out there though right now which may prevent you from getting to that total?
Well, I feel fairly confident about us getting to the total, but certainly there's unknowns all the time in business. But we've accounted for some of that in our guidance to make sure that we're fairly solid ground. We don't like to go to the market if there's a potential major risk and say that we're going to deliver, because CSL has been delivering on what we've promised, and that's really part of what we do. But there are risks. I mean, right now the coronavirus has not really impacted our business, and we do have business in China. But because of the medicines that we produce and the supply chain that we've established, we have flexibility to account for that. So that's obviously something that is on people's minds and ours as well. But in general, I'd say, we don't manage the business half on half. We manage the business, for the long term. So if I was, completely worried about one particular item in the second half, then we would have called that out. But I think we're in pretty good stead because these medicines are in high demand, and we have the ability to continue to deliver them to patients around the globe.
You mentioned the coronavirus. What do you make of the coronavirus, and what's CSL's work that you're doing with the University of Queensland at the moment on the virus?
Yeah, well, thanks, Ed. We are working with the University of Queensland, but coronavirus is different than influenza as well. And I think that initially people thought, well, CSL kind of makes vaccines, so this will be something that they do. We have a lot of insight into vaccines in terms of influenza, but this virus is different. So what we're doing at the University of Queensland is using the domain expertise that we have in terms of cell line development, in terms of some manufacturing process. We've supplied them with one of our products, proprietary products, which is an adjuvant, which potentiates the immune response in patients, and that's called MF59. So we've agreed to supply them with MF59 to use in their research as they develop these potential therapies. Now, it's all in early stage because this is an evolving issue, obviously, across the globe. And so we're working with them to bring expertise, insights, whatever help we can give in terms of this process. And we're not looking at it as a commercial opportunity. It's really the humanitarian efforts that we feel we should be involved in.
You also wanted to ask if the University of Queensland does potentially find a vaccine or a cure, is there an opportunity for CSL to manufacture and distribute it?
Well, it depends on what the vaccine is made of and how it's made. Clearly, we will do whatever we can to assist in that effort.
In your results today, you've also said the immunoglobulin portfolio has performed exceptionally well. What's underpinned this growth, and how can you keep this growth going forward?
Well, the growth is really underpinned by demand, Ed, and what we've seen over the past number of years is this increased demand for the use of immunoglobulins. So Ig, or immunoglobulins, is the main protein in our body that fights off infection. It also impacts a lot of other immune-mediated diseases. So in the neurology space, we've seen growth in chronic neurological conditions, where we've recently gained approval for both Privigen and Hizentra, two of our products in the portfolio in the United States, and that's driving a lot of demand and growth. Primary immune deficiency, the most severe type, would be what people might know of as the boy in the bubble, where people don't have a functioning immune system and need immunoglobulins to support them not gaining infections and dying from infection. And then secondary immunodeficiency is also driving this, and that is immunodeficiency that's caused by suppressing the immune system. And the reason that people are getting their immune system suppressed is because of the use of new cancer therapies, such as T-cell therapies or B-cell depleting therapies. And you have to really manage the way that these products attack tumors. And of course, the immune system is meant to ward off anything that looks odd in your system. So then as you suppress that, these actual products can target the tumors, but then you have to boost that immune system back, and Ig is one of the reasons, or one of the uses of immunoglobulins to do that. So it's not that there's kind of a relapsing, remitting demand dynamic here. What we see is a continued use of Ig, and we're seeing this around the globe. It's a growing demand for this product. And so I think we can continue to grow in this space, and that's why we're continuing to invest in the raw material supply side as well as the manufacturing and our investment in our capital projects. So that balance of spending capital is only driven by what we see as the demand in the future. So that's the reason we invest, and if we didn't see that demand continuing, we would stop investing in that particular area.
One little blip on your results today seems to be albumin sales falling a little bit in China. Can you just talk me through what's going on in that market?
Mm-hmm. So China is a large market of importation for albumin from CSL. We're the largest supplier in China of albumin that's imported. And basically what happened this year, and we called it out at the full year results and going into the guidance for this year, is we're transitioning our distribution model in China to our own good supply practices license. And so we're taking over distribution, and that has an effect in terms of inventories within current distribution model, transitioning to our distribution model, and the transfer of the receivables back and forth. So there's a one-off impact this year that we called out at full year, and that is being resolved through this year, and then we'll return to a normal level next year. So it's an anomaly impact this year versus the ongoing growth. But there's still a strong demand for albumin in China and a growth story there in China, and so I expect that to continue. And we saw double-digit growth in Europe and our emerging markets, or what we call intercontinental, as well as growth in the U.S. in albumin. So the offset was China, which is our single largest market for albumin today, but that's going to normalize again next year.
Turning to the share price, it's now at about 324 Australian dollars, and a lot of analysts predict it's going to keep rising. Do you think CSL shares are overvalued?
Well, I guess that's up to the investment community to determine. I think that what we've done and what I focus on is really what is the strategy that we're employing. So to me, share price and those discussions are really more of the scoreboard, and what we're trying to focus on is the game plan. So it's about, do we have the right strategy? Is it sustainable? Can we deliver sustainable growth? Can we deliver an ever-increasing amount of dividends to our shareholders while balancing our investment in capital and people and innovation in terms of R&D investment? The share price and the reaction of the market will be determined by those that see value in what they invest in. So I guess if you look at it from a value perspective, the share price has continued to go up significantly over the last couple of years. So I assume that people investing are seeing value in what we're doing from a strategic standpoint.
At the end of January, Britain kicked off its Brexit program and is starting to slowly leave the European Union. Do you think that'll have any impact on CSL's European business?
No, I don't think so. We do have operations in the UK. So we have a flu manufacturing facility in Liverpool. And we had already made arrangements to make sure that we would be ready for any impact by Brexit. So we invested money, not knowing whether we would do it, by creating, for instance, a release laboratory in the European area versus the UK. So we still have a release laboratory for flu vaccine in the UK. We have a release laboratory in Europe to make sure that we can release these powerful vaccines that can protect human health, whether Brexit happened or not and how regulations change and move. Outside of that, I don't think it will really impact our business at all. And even that, we've minimized any impact by making sure we have some redundant processes that can serve both Europe and the UK.
Just last question on the biotech sector. How difficult is it at the moment to find and retain really good talent?
Well, look, I mean, the biotech segment is growing significantly across the globe. But, CSL, I think, has done a number of things that, for us, has been really good. One, we talked about our research here in Australia. And I would say that we are able to really attract a high level of expertise here in Australia. And there's excellent science, education, and people here in Australia to help on the research side. We see the same. We're the largest employers in Marburg, Germany, where we have a big facility in an R&D area. The same in Bern, Switzerland, and also in the U.S. And there's a lot of people out there that are also looking at companies in terms of growth. It helps to be a growth company as well. There are other biotechs that are struggling for growth or have no growth or don't even have a product commercialized yet. and so there's a lot of risk in biotech as well. So when you look at the growth profile of CSL and you look at the fact that we're continuing to move forward on a growth perspective, that helps attract people. And then the retention comes from the purpose and mission of the company and the culture and the values that the company espouses. I recently had the pleasure of meeting 8 new college grads, university grads that we've hired in it for internships here at CSL. And out of all 8, the main reason they're coming is because of our mission, our purpose, and our values. And so I think that also makes a difference, not just the science. They were clearly coming because of the science as well. But at CSL, we try to make sure that we're paying attention to all the things that make us a viable and preferred employer.
Paul Perreault, thank you very much for joining us.
Thanks, Ed.